The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kudirat Kekereekun, was last Saturday in Lagos at the behest of the state governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who pulled out all the stops to host a dinner in her honor. During that event, the governor described the CJN as a proud daughter of Lagos. In the immediate aftermath, international human rights lawyer Professor Chidi Odinkalu had, through a series of posts on X, detailed how Governor Sanwo-Olu is a party in a case at the Supreme Court where Justice Kekereekun holds sway. Professor Odinkalu again tried to shine the light on how the growing dalliance between Nigeria's judges and politicians go against every letter and spirit of the nation's constitution. Well, we're now being joined by lawyer Adeyinka Olumide-Fusika, the senior advocate of Nigeria, to have a look at how the judiciary can be sanitized and how the influence of politicians over judicial officers can be reduced. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this day on Newsday.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what do you make of this backlash that the governor of Lagos State and the CJN are both getting after being received at an event? Is this the first time we've seen within the country a member of the judiciary being honored by a state government or fraternizing, for lack of a better word? And is this something to be concerned about? Your thoughts?
Well, I'll say that I understand the where Professor Odinkalu is coming from. But you need to understand that the Chief Justice of Nigeria is from Lagos State, and the event by the Lagos State government. Well, it's the way we roll in Nigeria. If, for instance, I am elevated to the bench now, I'm not aspiring to be elevated to the Supreme Court bench, but assuming I'm elevated, the Ondo State government, for instance, where I come from, may feel that it is obliged to host me and have just to congratulate me and all that. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean that when a case comes to me from Ondo State, I have reason to now favor the state above the law, you know. But what Professor Odinkalu is saying is, you know, this thing we say about, you know, appearance, you know, justice must not only be done, but must seem to be, you know. Justice Kekereekun is not the only one at the Supreme Court bench. You have so many other justices there. The rules of the NJC says if you feel that you are personally conflicted in a matter, you recuse yourself from it. And if any party that is appearing before the court believes that a particular justice may not do justice in the case, it can raise the issue. And I'm sure it will be dealt with at that level. But let me just say that, you know, and this is a personal opinion that I hold. I mean, it's not, I don't believe that, you know, attending such a congratulatory event by your state, you know, would necessarily impact on how you decide the case at the end of the day. And I don't know. I am not even aware. Okay, maybe some of these cases going on now between some state governments and the EFCC at the Supreme Court. The Lagos State government also has a case, you know. But I think that the case will be determined based on law and not on sentiment or affinity between one person or the other. I don't. Yeah, but Prof has cried wolf, but I really don't see it as it's just cultural in Nigeria. In other places, it might be frowned at, but in Nigeria, that's the way we roll. If I have a friend that has been elevated to the bench now, I might just have a party or whatever, a luncheon or a dinner for that person. It doesn't mean that when I go before him, he's going to make decisions in my favor. But Prof is also right to say that some of these things should be cut down in order not to give a wrong impression to the uninformed public, people who are not members of the legal confraternity. Like, for instance, you know, all this display, the governor is buying cars and then calling all the judges of the state to hand over cars and things like that. You know, it's just not very good. It doesn't speak well of, it doesn't reflect, don't let me say speak, reflect well on the independence of the judiciary. I think that is what the point that Professor Adeyinka was trying to make.
Now, you said it's cultural, but I'm wondering at what point do you draw a line between culture and professionalism? Because it does seem like resistant political influence is getting tougher, for judges at this time in our nation's history. So why is this so, and what do you think can be done to curb this?
See, look, we have 36 states in Nigeria, all with their, each one with its own high court, magistrate court, customary court, and so on and so forth. You have the Federal Capital Territory High Court, you have the Federal High Court, then you have the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. If you look at the number of courts that we have, in Lagos, for instance, you have over, if I'm not mistaken, over 60 judges in Lagos sitting over cases. This year alone, if you take a tally of the judgments that have been delivered or the cases that have been considered across the length and breadth of Nigeria, you are talking of, thousands of cases. So, the problem we have is that some of the ones that go into the media, I'm a practitioner, I know it as a matter of fact. The ones that go into the media, the ones that the media, people highlight because they are newsworthy, are the political cases and the, election petitions and things like that. Take the case of Rivers State that is currently, the imbroglio relating to Rivers State. And you have some judges in Rivers State High Court making decisions, some at the Federal High Court in Abuja making decisions. So when this goes into the media, it seems as if the entire judiciary is useless, it's not working well, and so on and so forth. But that's not correct. The judiciary has a lot of problems. I will tell you that, but it's not when we give the impression that all the judges are corrupt and so on and so forth. I don't think that is a correct reflection of what is actually going on. So the CGN was actually quite right in saying, this is a problem of, very few bad eggs spoiling the whole, giving wrong impression of the whole basket. The problems we have are beyond the issues of corruption. If the cases are not going on as at when they should go on, you are stagnant in court for 20, 30 years trying to resolve a commercial dispute. That's not good enough. Let me tell you, for instance, the Court of Appeal in Lagos have been there this week on 2 or 3, about the third time today. Today will be the third time that I'll be appearing before one panel or the other. At the beginning of the year, you had the budget, how much would they spend on electricity? How much would they spend on public electricity? How much did they budget for diesel, for instance, to supplement and all that? But between January and now, the thing has gone very bad. So that the courts now, they try to sit, rather than sitting up to, say, 3 o'clock, in order to conserve the resources available to the courts. They may sit up to 1, 12 at times, so that they continue. Sometimes you go there, there's no light. So because of that, cases will get adjourned. Administrative work that will enhance the hearing of cases would be affected, and things like that. Lawyers will play their own games. So those are things that affect the effective administration of justice. But the one we highlight most is because of this corruption thing. And I say, and I know that even though it is there, as a practice, it is there, but, how many cases do we file in Lagos State, for instance, the CGN was given the figure. This year alone, the number of cases that have been filed, the number that have been determined, the Chief Judge of Lagos State, how many of them are political? How many of them are, where do you have the noise? Well, don't let me call it noise. People have a right to complain. I don't want to be rude. They complain about corruption and so on and so forth. So many judgments have been given this year in Lagos State, for instance, where I'm based and I practice. How many have you seen highlighted, oh, the judge is corrupt, or this has happened, and so on and so forth? So it's all these political cases, election petitions and all that. And left to me, I don't know how we are going to do it, maybe, especially election petition and, maybe it's, this corruption, charging for government officials for corruption and all that. That is where you have this kind of things happening, and that reflects badly on the entire judiciary, as if they don't do any other thing other than take the Federal High Court that we are talking about, just a few decisions, by one or two judges relating to, what's it called, Rivers State. That same Federal High Court this year would have delivered so many judgments in other matters. And, you know, people are not complaining about it. If you are not satisfied, you go on appeal. The appeal will determine it. If you are not satisfied at that level, you go to the Supreme Court, you know. But when you hear that a judge has given another restraining so person in Cross River and so on and so forth, in River State and so on and so forth, you think that that is the entirety of what the Federal High Court has done this year. That is not completely reflective of the situation of things. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's no corruption. There is, and the CJN, in his speech at the event, did say that measures will be taken to curb this, to bring the ones that are identified as bad eggs to book in the country so that we'll nip it in the bud. I think, you know, she has a, you know, the thing is well cut out for her to deal with, so that these ones that, you know, people see, perception, it matters, will be dealt with in the way that it should be dealt with. Yeah.
Fair enough. Some observers would say that previous CJNs had dalliances with other prominent individuals and governors of states. But in this case, she's a female, she's a woman, and making her a little bit more conspicuous amongst the group of men who previously held the job. But in this case, on whom or where does the responsibility for sanitizing the judiciary fall?
Well, you know, by our constitutional order, the duty of, you know, regulating and disciplining judges and all that rests with, constitutionally rests with the National Judicial Council, or so we believe. And if you look at it, there are issues which I believe the current Chief Justice of Nigeria will be looking at, because even if you look at this in the past, where, you know, the NJC has brought its, you know, sledgehammer to, well, not sledgehammer, disciplinary power to bear on some judges, you know, some few years down the line, you know, you have the judges coming back, you know, through one means or the other. I mean, going to court and then the court saying, no, they were wrongly punished and so on and so forth, and they are back sitting on the bench, possibly for good reasons, possibly for technical reasons, so that as the CJN is saying, okay, the NJC is going to act and do something about these things, the only suggestion I would want to be making is in doing that, you know, some of these judgments should be considered, so that, you know, when the NJC actually acts, and, you know, in terms of discipline of judges, you know, the sanction is able to stand the test of time. You know, not that the NJC will impose a sanction, and then a court would then find, I mean, is it not even ridiculous? The NJC is the highest body, and it's made up of justices, you know, from sitting past, present, from all over the, you know, and you will think that that kind of a God's body will know how to go about it, and we have confidence in that body that it's able to do its duties. But somehow, those that are disciplined, I think we have about 2 or 3, you know, in the past that are now back on the bench sitting. So it shows that somehow there's a little bit of ineffectiveness in the powers of in the sanctioning powers of the NJC, which I think the current Chief Justice of Nigeria would, you know, with his colleagues, will take on board in fashioning out the best way to handle the situation. Yesterday or some days ago, the Armed Forces Committee, in the National Assembly, I think I was reading in the papers, visited the EFCC chairman, and we were talking about a law that says army officers, I don't know whether it's a law or a regulation or something like that, that EFCC cannot investigate, you know, armed forces personnel unless they have first of all been subjected to orderly room or whatever, court martial, whatever they call it, even in corruption or whatever cases, that the EFCC cannot do that. You have that all over the place. The police, for instance, may also claim that a police officer that is doing the same thing cannot be, investigated by the EFCC unless, for instance, he's been court-martialed and removed from the police force. We have the same thing in the judiciary. In fact, our own is a decision of court, I think, saying that judges and justices, cannot be proceeded again. That are, maybe they are found wanted, cannot be proceeded against until the NJC has, had the opportunity of disciplining them and removing them from the bench. It's understandable because, if you allow some of the things we hear, if you allow the, if that power is not, sort of controlled, you may have a situation where judges are blackmailed by these law enforcement agencies. They want a judge to convict an accused person if he does, or they want him to do something. If he doesn't play ball with them, then they begin to bring all kinds of pressure to bear on that judge, accusing blackmailing and so on. I'm not saying that is what they are doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm only saying that it's a possibility. So when the court, for instance, says, okay, bring the matter to us first. When the NJC says, when the court says the NJC has to discipline the judges first, or the affected person has to consider the case first, and then it is only after that person has left the bench that the EFCC, the police, the ICPC, can then proceed, against that person. It's understandable. But you again look at it the other way too, that, for instance, the NJC, do they have police powers, for instance, the way it is done is somebody will write a petition, I believe this person is so, or this judge has done this, is wrong. Then the panel will sit down and look at it, and, the NJC's mechanism is not such, for instance, that can do the kind of investigation that the police, the EFCC and all that will do in order to, bring out investigative findings that will grant, find a proper decision against the judge. So I think that our current Chief Justice of Nigeria has to look at ways of using these bodies as well. Even though ultimately the NJC will have to make a decision on disciplining the judges. If, for instance, these bodies are encouraged to also do their investigation, make their submissions to the NJC, then the NJC will look at it and then, confront, if the investigative findings are there, then the NJC will confront the affected judge or personnel, judicial personnel with the facts and these investigating findings, take the response, and make a decision before removing or disciplining or suspending it is only thereafter that if there's, the anti-corruption or anti-crime agencies can then proceed against that kind of judicial personnel. So we have to find a way. That's what I'm trying to say, is that we have to find a way to bring together the investigative capabilities, the powers, the capabilities of the anti-crime agencies and the disciplinary powers of the NJC. These two, when we bring them together, then maybe the work will be more effective. Okay,
very well said. Now, earlier you talked about some political cases that make it to the media, and I'd like us to focus a bit on it. Some analysts have called for training and retraining of judges on post-election justice delivery. They believe judges should prioritize substantial justice over technicalities. What are your thoughts on this?
Technicalities, well, some of these cases are not the ones that are, the judges say they are doing substantial justice in the matter. Some of them are not. The ones, for instance, if you bring out any particular one, I will be able to tell you what the court decided in the matter. So when we keep on saying, oh, technicality and all that, it's not, all the time. I think it's just a catchphrase that people use to give the impression that the courts, do not look at the merits of cases. They just base it on technical points and then knock out what they should look at, Yes, I agree. I was saying the other time that it is our problem in the judiciary goes beyond corruption. Training is part of it. Education, for instance, if you to understand a lot, some of the judges, let me say a lot, lack and this is my own observation, I don't mean it as an insult to anybody, philosophical grounding on some of the, if you are talking of federalism, for instance, a judge should understand what federalism is, the relationship between the state, the federal, and so on and so forth. Without that understanding, it will make any kind of order. It will, for instance, say, I don't want to go beyond it will, for instance, say that the state can, you are seizing the resources of a particular state, or say that the resources of the state, what is due to the state, should not be given to that state. I listened to Professor Odita in one of the interviews, and I think he got it quite right. So it's not about the law alone. You must have the philosophical grounding as a judge to understand why these laws are like this. There is a basis for it, so that when they bring cases before you, beyond, you understand that there are certain things you can't do. It's just beyond you as a judge. So education is part of it. So I agree. Training and retraining and all that. But even sometimes when they are well trained and all that, the kind of pressure that the powers that be bring, on some of these judges, is. One can sit here and say, oh, if I were the one, I would not, the system is not resilient enough. Or some of these judges are not resilient enough to say, no, we will, So that happens. So maybe the training, the assurance of the job assurance that, look, nobody can, as long as you're on the right path and you're applying the law correctly, feel free, you'll be okay. But of course, people have ambition, some want to be elevated, and they believe that some of the parties coming before them will be instrumental to the elevation to higher bench and all that. So even when the thing is white, sometimes maybe they begin to say, oh, it's gray, it's, introduce their own coloring and all that into the whole thing, So you are talking about personal integrity here. So it's not because, sometimes it's not because the judge doesn't know the law or doesn't know what to do and all that. I say again, like any success that you achieve at the expense of your country is no success, because at the end of the day, when your country suffers, you suffer along. So if for reasons of, oh, Mr. So-so-so is going to be useful to me when I want to move from magistrate to high court, or from high court to, it's good to we all have ambition, or I want to become this or become that, Whatever it is that the person wants to become, it's all to serve the country, not to serve yourself, And if you put yourself in that position, once you're in that situation, the same person that helped you will come later and say, do this for me, and you'll not be able to say no. So I agree that somehow the resilience, we have to build the capacity of the judiciary to be resilient to that interference, influence, and all that from the executive, not the executive arm as such, even from, some holding executive powers, putting people under pressure and so on and so forth. So it is how our current Chief Justice of Nigeria will work on what, the others have done to build that resistance in our, in the judges of the lower courts is quite important. And I think that by also bringing disciplinary measures to bear heavily and making it effective, if you do this, this is the consequence that you are going to get. It's going to be unpalatable for you. So that in pursuing your ambition, right, don't do things that would even make you, leave that position. So discipline is important, education is important, and all.
Let me interrupt you, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Adeyinka, Olumide-Fusika, SAN.